Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Book Talk. This time we have with us Fawzia Gilani-Williams. So before starting the conversation, quick introduction about Fawzia. So Fawzia is an educator and researcher. She's also a children's author. She's written a bunch of books with us at Tulika. I'm going to show you two of them. One is Ismat's Eid, and the other one is Henna on My Hands. So Fawzia has also written a bunch of other books, and she's very passionate about, children's education and storytelling and literature. So that's what we're going to talk about. Welcome, Fawzia. It's so lovely to have you here.
Well, Bismillah, Assalamu alaikum, and greetings of peace to everyone. And I'm so grateful to the Tulika team for being my partner in my writing journey. So thank you very much for this invitation. It's lovely. Thank you.
Love to have you here. And, just to kind of start things off, how did you sort of decide to get into the children's education space? Because, that's kind of been the sort of foundational aspect of your career and journey before moving into writing, really. So how did education happen for you? Like, what sparked your interest?
So in becoming a teacher, that was quite by accident because both my parents were in a medical career, and I always thought that I would pursue that.
Okay.
But it didn't plan out that way. There was a teachers' college near my home, literally, I would say about 10 minutes away. And so I enrolled on there, and I actually enjoyed working with children. And so that's basically how I got into teaching. I became a teacher in England. I taught there for a while. And well, actually, as soon as I graduated, I went to America and then I came back to England. But that's basically the story of how I became a teacher. In terms of how I became a writer from there, so my husband was also a teacher, and he's American from Ohio.
Okay.
And yeah, so we were teaching at a school that we thought had some behavior issues. And so it was a comment that he shared that, it would be good if we could, get some resources, create some things. And at the time, we didn't have stories as such that we, I don't know, that spoke to the children in quite the way that needed to be. And so from England, I had a lot of experience in creating my own resources. And so I guess those teacher resources that I created eventually became published books. So I think that was my way into writing. But I think a lot of teachers, if not all, are actually writers. So
Yeah.
yes.
But was writing something you always kind of imagined doing, like in terms of, say, just even writing a book? And obviously, writing for children is a completely different ball game altogether. Was it something you always thought you would do?
No, I don't think I ever thought that in terms of children's literature. I do know that I don't ever remember my dad not having a book in his hand. He was very literary. He would take us to the library. I think we went every week, if not more. And I would just get piles and piles of books. And I noticed that there's a similarity there with other authors that I listened to. Um, Everybody says, yeah, we went to the library and we got loads of books. So I have that common string there, along with other people who are passionate about writing. So um, I think my dad wanted me to be an academic writer, and
Okay.
I do. So I do some academic writing. My PhD was on children's literature, and so yes, so. I think I kind of like did what my father kind of like wanted as well, but I also went into children's literature, and I think the springboard for that actually came one year when it was, well, obviously in December it's Christmas, it's Hanukkah, and at the time I was in the library, but it also happened to be Eid that Eid also fell into December. And I was there with my daughter, and there was another holiday that I'd never heard of, and it was called Kwanzaa. And there were books on Kwanzaa. And yet, the second largest celebration in the world, there were no books. And I asked the librarian, and she had been a librarian for 30 years. And when I said Eid, she said, say the word again. And I said, Eid. She said, well, I've never heard of that. She said, but I've heard of Ramadan. So she took me to the nonfiction, and there were some books on Ramadan, but Eid it's a celebration. It's a time of laughter, fun, feast, food, and there was nothing there that spotlighted my child. So she was actually invisible in the literature. She's not in holiday literature. So I think I did actively work to address a gap that I saw in public libraries.
Okay. Wow, that's interesting. And I know because you actively kind of speak about this, and it's there on your website as well. You talk about mirror books and window books, which I find really fascinating. Can you explain what these two kinds of books are to people who may not be aware of them, and why do you think they're important today, especially for children's literature?
So it's extremely important that children feel good about themselves. They have a positive identity about themselves. And I think those children who had beginnings like mine, where we are a minority, we find it difficult, or it was always a challenge, because you don't see yourself in the literature. And I read somewhere that if a child doesn't see themselves, it sends a very strong message that you're not important. So in that respect, mirror books are exactly as the term says. If you look in a mirror, you see yourself. So a mirror book is something that you will see everything about yourself. You'll see your family, you'll see your community, you'll see the buildings around you, the plants, the animals, the food, your clothes, everything that is familiar. And in terms of language acquisition, the familiar will always speed the rate at which you learn that language. So that's why if you're in America, you're going to have things that are familiar to you as you're reading through the book. So it makes sense to have whatever is that you can identify with in the book. So mirror books are very important for a child's self-development. Window books are just as important, but perhaps the child should have the mirror books first, because it's identity. And window books are important because they basically tell a child about the other cultures of the world, the other people in the world, our neighbors, our friends, and they actually take a child to other parts of the world. So they're both very, very crucial. They're both important. And I think it's something that children should be aware about. So when you talked about, when you mentioned the research, so my master's degree was an ethnography, participant observation. So some of that spilled out as I worked as a teacher over in the place where I'm in the Middle East. And I remember when I first went there, I asked the children to draw a picture of themselves. They're all girls, and they had beautiful jet black hair. And when I looked at all the pictures, they had yellow, red, orange, brown. So when the children came in the morning, I sat them down there, I put their pictures and the sentences that they wrote up on the board, and I said, I love your pictures, but I said, who did you draw? And in unison, they shouted out, American Girls. So that was a red flag. because that basically tells you that, well, you're not getting enough books where you can see yourselves. So to me, that was, that was something that needed to be addressed, in the sense that we need to give children books where they see themselves. Of course, you give them books where they can see, other communities as well. Now, they could have said to me, oh, well, that's me, because we have a culture of dyeing our hair. And they could have said, oh, I colored my hair, but they didn't say that. They actually planted themselves in another country. So a few years later, there was something else. And I was very surprised with myself that, why didn't you notice that before?
Mm.
So Sangeeta, if you come here, it's a desert.
Yeah.
And so the buildings are obviously they're going to be flat.
Yeah.
Right. But if you go back to England or to Ohio, where my family, my married home is, it rains a lot. And so you have a peaked roof. So the rain falls, so the rain is going to come off. Here, there's no rain, so it's going to be flat.
Yeah.
But my children, my students, they would make houses with, a triangular roof. So what I would do is I'd have them draw a house, and they always put the triangle on top. Then we used to have this huge window. It was just massive. I would take them outside to the window, and we'd look outside, and then I would ask them, what shape are the buildings? And they would say square, rectangle, oblong. And then I would say, are you sure? And they'd look, yes, those are the shapes. And then I would take them back, and I'd put their houses on the whiteboard. And then I'd say, why have you got a triangle on your house? And straight away, like, you could tell that they were thinking, because it used to be silence. And then one child would say, well, those are the ones in the books. So I would do this exercise every year, and I used to do it with student teachers. And the nice thing is, actually, one of those student teachers that I did this for at one of the colleges, she is now one of the teachers at the schools, one of the schools where I'm a cluster librarian. And she made a remark. She said, that was quite a profound message, and I actively try and make sure that my children know that, this is an American, this is a house from maybe China, and this one is from, from an Arab land. So children just need to be made aware. Critical thinking needs to be going on about, what are you looking at? Because I think a lot of literature and a lot of things that we are surrounded with, they have powerful messages.
Yeah.
And children just need to be made aware that, when you look, what are you looking at? What is that? So yeah, I think the research kind of like helps me with this.
No, but that's amazing that you're able to kind of do this, right? And I think give children from sort of different communities and locations, also just demographically, that their own sense of self and identity, and this is who you are and this is where you belong, which I think is really cool. And I think that's something we actively try to do at Tulika as well, because one of the things
Yes.
we really believe in is, to have rooted Indian stories, and, children can have access to them in their own languages. So, it's to get it across as much as possible so they can even see themselves in the books, like you say. It's so important for that, to see that
Yes.
representation. So it's truly amazing work that you're doing, in this space. Having said that, since you have been an educator for so many years and you've been involved with children's literature, and in different countries and geographies, what do you think makes a good story or a book for children?
Well, I think I'm going to be influenced by what I do as a cluster librarian. I'm managing librarians who are working with, I think altogether there's 13,000 children. One of the most important things, because we only have those children for a certain amount of time in a month. So to me, a good book is a book with a message that makes a child want to make the world a better place. some kind of a positive message, because I know that children, they live in their own world. They don't live in an adult world. And their world is all about, was somebody kind to me? Was somebody not kind? And so I feel that books are a great way to empower children to be better people. So that's one aspect. But obviously, we have so many different variations of, many different topics that we have to cover, whether it's about like different themes, my family, my community, tell me like stories, and one is actually tell me a story. So anyway, all these different things, these different themes, we have to select books that, empower or feed into a child's imagination, and let them do things that are, on a springboard into creativity. So, to me, a good book is a book that does those things. That, but the most important thing to me is the well-being of a child. I think children should, after, they should have access to books that make them feel happy.
Yeah, no, that's true. I think stories are a very powerful medium and tool, I think, for children to sort of learn, and even just not just about themselves, but also about the world surrounding them, which is so true. Um, so coming to, writing for children, which is, again, you've done a bunch of books. As I mentioned with Tulika itself, you've done a bunch of picture books. What is your process like while writing a picture book for children?
So this is it's really a good question, Sangeeta, because at the moment I'm working on a project with children. So whereas before I'm writing and then I started writing with other authors, now I am writing with children.
Oh,
So yes, it's really lovely, and I've got a few titles. I think we've got 6 at the moment. But what I noticed is in this, it's a library project, and there are 2 types of writers. One writer is a plotter, and the other type of writer, they call them a pantser. So what a plotter will do, a plotter will have the beginning, the middle, and the end. They know every detail about, the characters, about the setting, about everything that's going to happen. The pantser, on the other hand, they'll start, but they really don't know where it goes. And so, yeah, I think that's really why I can write as quickly as I do, because it just goes in the direction that I don't even have a formula. I have a main idea,
okay.
but I'm sure that all of those decades of reading different books, and even now in my position as a librarian, we have to select hundreds of books.
Yeah.
And we also have to do cultural sensitivity as well, and make sure there isn't anything about smoking or alcohol or something like that. We have to keep it very at the children's level.
Yeah.
So but you take things from there, you absorb them, and I don't know, it just kind of like flows out. So there's a plotter and there's a pantser, and so my way of writing is actually closer to a pantser.
Okay. That's interesting. That's fascinating to know. And yeah, finally, what is the most memorable thing a child has said to you about one of your books? Maybe one of the Tulika books, for example. What's the best thing like a kid has ever said to you?
Well, I think the most memorable one about the Tulika books is Ismet's Eid.
Yeah.
So it was I was in Ohio. It was the school that I was actually working at. It was just a few days before Eid, and so obviously we had all the Eid stories. So I was reading this story, and most of the children there were Arab Muslim, and but there was one child who was Indian. And see, Ismat's Eid is very Indian centric.
Yeah.
The look on his face while I was telling this story, because he could see through the images on the, the illustrations, he could see, it was just spotlighting his family and his culture. So when I was saying like biryani and shir korma, samosas, it was a priceless look in his eyes. And then he shared afterwards like, oh, that's the best story. And I wouldn't have thought that that could be, somebody's most good, because I literally was trying to fill a gap. I'd seen how many what Christmas books there were, how many Hanukkah books, Chinese New Year books, and so I just wrote as many books as I could on Eid. And actually, out of the Tulika books, I think 3/4 of like most of my books with Tulika have some elements of Eid in them.
Yeah.
So I was trying to hit that mark, and I think I did.
Yeah, and they're beautiful books. I mean, Ismat's Eid is, I'm going to show it again just because it truly is a lovely book. And I think Proiti Roy again has illustrated it so
She
beautifully,
really did. It's
honestly. I mean,
beautiful.
it's just
She was amazing.
yeah.
I always say that it's the illustrator that brings the story to life, and it's the cover that they do that makes a person go and reach for it. So yes, a big clap for our illustrators, mashallah.
Yeah, and even had on my hands because again, I just love the illustrations on this, especially with just showing. I think it's
Yes,
so sweet.
it's very cute.
It's a
Yes,
very cute book. But yeah, thank you so much for doing what you do. And we hope to see more books from you. And yeah, thank you so much for being here.
thank you very much indeed. It's been a pleasure, and I hope we connect again. And thank you very much.